Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and today we're going to be doing another top 5 video. And normally I wouldn't have done this so close to the last one, but I realized that it's very strange that I did my top 5 favorite archetypes without mentioning my top 5 favorite classes. Now, if you've been paying attention at all to what's been going on the channel, I've already pretty much stated what my favorite class is, which is the Investigator, but I'll go into a little bit more detail and I'll talk a little bit about my own preferences first before we actually get to the list itself. So I made a video a while ago, and it's what I essentially call the gamer narrative scale, where on one side you have the pure gaming aesthetic, the war game aesthetic. All you worry about is the rules and how your character functions in the game. And on the other side is pure narrative. It's all about telling a story. Rules be damned. Everything is about the characters and the plot that's going on. And I typically place a lot of players and GMs kind of on this scale between the two. And it doesn't mean that, if you're on one side of the scale, you don't have traits of the other. It's just kind of more what your leanings are. And for me personally, I love the rules. I get excited for things like pockets in Pathfinder 2e. And I like to make my characters function very well with a very clean amount of mechanics. But I tend to lean more on the narrative side of the scale. I would say I'm a little bit like 20% onto the narrative side of the scale, just because everything I do is usually influenced by the narrative. I make a character who fits in the narrative. I make a character who has themselves a very strong narrative. A lot of the rules and a lot of the mechanics I follow, I do so in pursuit of making my character feel very unique and feel very narratively appropriate for what I'm going for. Overall, it works out pretty well for me, and it's my preferred style. So I would say I'm a little bit more of a narrative gamer. If I was to put, of the 3 pillars of combat, combat, exploration, and roleplay, I would say I'm about 50% roleplay with about 25% combat and narrative. So that's about where I stand when it comes to what I like in these games. Now, as I mentioned, I do get excited about mechanics. I get excited about rules, and I like a lot of things about how some of the characters actually work. That's also something that really factors into it. So you're going to see a little bit of aspects of this and that. Just know that this is my overall preference. And if I'm getting excited about the rules, it's more or less because it's for narrative purposes that I really enjoy it. I like some of the aspects of it or the images they invoke. But enough with the chit chat. Let's go ahead and get to the list. Number 5 on my list for my favorite classes is going to be the Ranger. The Ranger has been a long-time favorite of one of mine. In fact, I really liked Ranger in Pathfinder 1e, actually. I liked a lot of the subclasses that it had at the time, and I really enjoy the idea of a monster hunter. I like someone who tracks down monsters, who uses their innate knowledge to get the best of them, who, uses pieces of the monsters. I like things like The Witcher. The Witcher is a really good example of like a way the Ranger can be interpreted. I also like things like Monster Hunter and everything like that. I like understanding and using that knowledge to fight giant monsters. And I also just really like monsters in general. I'm actually a big like monsterphile when it comes to all kinds of like movie monsters, game monsters. The weirder the better. That's always stuff I'm really interested in. And a class that really has a history of focusing on particular groups of monsters or understanding of monsters really makes the Ranger stand out to me. Now, this current iteration of the Ranger is not my favorite. I think Pathfinder 1E's Ranger was my favorite, but that's because one of the subclasses, you could actually take aspects of the monsters you hunt and kind of incorporate them into yourself. Like you could get small bonuses based on your favored prey. And they've actually removed the favored prey kind of option. It's still there in some places. You can still have some of that favored prey aspects, but they've limited it and removed it down to a point where it just doesn't feel the same as it used to. And there's some political reasons why it is the way it is. And a lot of that I do understand, but it does still kind of take away from some of that aspect. And they've had to dumb it down because of those reasons. Regardless, I really do like the Rangers. And honestly, Pathfinder 2E's Rangers feel really good. Flurry, precision, and outwit are all really good edges you can have for your hunt prey action. And while the hunt prey action I feel like gets in the way a little bit sometimes, like when you're fighting weak enemies, hunt prey becomes more of a burden than a boon. But when you're fighting bigger enemies, hunt prey becomes really, really good. The only problem is that most of the Rangers' really cool abilities are focused on their hunt prey, which makes small enemies just terrible because you're using an action to pretty much hurt a little enemy and probably kill it in 1 to 2 shots. And then you got to do it again and then again and again. If you're a ranged ranger build, it's not so bad. It's better than taking your third attack penalty, of course. But if you're using a reload weapon, it gets a little rough then. In fact, in our current game, Riptide, we have a player who's playing a precision ranger crossbow A-style character, and they do some really good, like, instant big damage, but they do it once per round, and that's because of, hunt prey and all that kind of stuff. It's definitely, mechanically, it gets frustrating against some enemies, and it works well against the stronger enemies. Unfortunately, most combats in Pathfinder 2E, you're dealing with typically enemies that will go down in a round or two, making hunt prey kind of encumbersome. One of the biggest reasons why Ranger is 5th on the list is I feel like some of their mechanics just get in the way. Ranger still has a lot to offer, and even without hunt prey, I think Ranger is still plenty good. I just think that one of their keystone abilities is mechanically just not the most optimal thing to do, or if it is, it makes you less optimal than some of the other characters. Regardless, I love Monster Hunter characters. I think there's all kinds of really cool ways you could play a Ranger. There's lots of good dedications that go perfectly with Ranger. Heck, the Bounty Hunter is really good. Now we have Ghost Hunter and all kinds of stuff. Ranger has a lot of options, and it's just one of the reasons why I really like the aesthetic of the character class. Number 4 is the Inventor, which is actually very interesting. Inventor jumped up onto my list. It wasn't anywhere near my top 5, but it became one of my top 5 after I played a Inventor. And honestly, of the, of the classes on this list, Inventor is one of 2 I've actually gotten to play in Pathfinder 2E myself. So Inventor is a lot of fun. I like characters that are very utility based. With Inventor's gadgets and gizmos, there's a lot of really cool things that they can do. I love the fact that their main feature can be in their armor, their weapon, or a really cool, animal / construct companion. I think the Inventor is a little underrated currently, but if you really understand the game system, and something similar I said in my video for the Inventor, if you really understand the game itself, honestly, Inventor's got a lot of really cool functionality. It really makes you kind of scratch your head in theory crafting with what kind of builds for your what's it called? It's their main contraption, whether it's the armor, weapon, or the companion, what have you. A lot of the builds for it gets really interesting. And not only that, but you're a crafting class. So, you also start with Inventor, which is really good. So you can not only make items for your party really easy, you can get magic item crafting really easy. you are just very useful and you can help make a lot of really cool things for your party. If your GM's really cool, they'll let you do all kinds of crazy stuff with your inventions, making, maybe a bunch of construct minions that you can use that are not quite companions, but can still be kind of good chaff or whatever. There's a lot of really cool things with the Inventor. One of the biggest reasons why it's not higher on the list, honestly, is I like probably one of the Inventor styles way more than the other two. I like the weapon innovations. Oh my goodness, the weapon innovation I think is really cool. You can do some really cool stuff with it, and for the character I made, I used the weapon innovation. There's some really fun stuff with it, and with some archetype dedications mixed in, the character came out really good. I essentially played a dwarf with a war axe that could turn into a combi weapon. It was a musket axe. War axe transforms musket axe. It could change its elemental extra damage type from its offensive boost. And I had a bunch of other abilities. I had these Sentinel and Bastion archetype dedications to make the character very tanky. He was very focused on making really good armor, making a really good weapon. He was a character who was essentially like, he was moving along the path of making a mech suit style character. Just, with a more emphasis on the weapon than the actual suit, obviously, since he didn't take the armor innovation. It was a really fun character idea, and the character played really well. I don't know how much I would enjoy the companion as much or the armor innovations. I feel like those two things kind of take away from how awesome the character could be. But then again, I never really played with them, so I really don't know. Regardless, I think that the Inventor is really good. I also am a big fan of utility style characters and support characters, and the Inventor can easily solve those things pretty well. They can be the party healer if they need to. They can be a tank, damage dealer, whatever you have. The Inventor is a really, really fun class for me. And you'll notice a trend with some of my class picks, but we'll get to that soon. I really don't have anything else to say about the Inventor. I like the idea of building your own really cool weapon that honestly will probably outmatch even magic weapons, like unique magic weapons that you find. And then on top of that as well, I like a lot of their features too. The rocket jump that they can get, or their ability to change their energy damage for their offensive boost. All of it's really, really cool. I think the character came out really well because of all the options. And honestly, there's a lot of ways that you could play the Inventor. But for me, I feel like it would be a little bit more limited because I had one style that worked really, really well, and I think I'd struggle playing a different style. Number 3 is the Wizard. Now, the Wizard is a very interesting one to me. It doesn't have a lot of mechanical functionality, I feel, in the game, and that's because it's a spellcaster class. A lot of the spellcasters don't have a lot of extra functionality like the marshals do because they get spells. Their functionality comes from what spells they have on hand. And the Wizard is just one of my favorites. I love the idea of building your spell book, finding new spells, or inventing new spells when you learn new spells. I like characters that are very inquisitive, very investigative. Playing a Wizard has so many different options. Not only that, but the individual schools can make it more interesting. If you add the Rune Mage archetype on top of it, I think it gets even more interesting. I think that, the Wizard is one of the best spellcasters overall because they can go super utility, they can go super offensive. They got all kinds of things going for them. One of my favorite characters I played, not in this system, but in another system, D&D 5e, was a wizard character, and I really, really enjoyed some of the things I was able to do with that character, even especially at the later levels. The homunculus spell was one of my most favorite spells from D&D 5e. And in Pathfinder 2e, there's a lot of spells that do some really cool things. I like being able to predict what's going to happen and having my spell list prepared. Something I do for my wizards, though, in my games, wizards and witches specifically, is I do allow them to take 10 minutes to swap one of their spells out in their spell book. The wizards have a theorem based on it, but I just give it to all of them. Wizards and witches, if they want to fill out their spell book like any of the other spellcasters, they have to pay a lot of gold, a decent amount of gold to do so, more than the other spellcasters do. And I find that frustrating. I find that frustrating on a multitude of levels. And not only that, but if they're going to heighten a spell, they have to have it prepared at that heightened slot. Unlike, spontaneous casters that can have their, I forget what it's called, like their favorite spell list, where they can heighten those spells from one spell from each spell level. I think it balances it out. And 10 minutes is not like anything you can do in combat. It lets the wizards come more prepared for a combat situation when it comes up, but it also allows them to bring utility when the choice is. And honestly, even though they may have a tool for every situation, it's based on limited resources. The more utility your wizard uses, the less combat capability they have. And if they go through a combat, the less utility they'll probably have available after the fact. So I think it overall balances out. Now, it's not nothing I've personally used, so it's a home rule that I've never gotten to use myself. And I think even without that, the wizard is really, really cool. I love the rune mages. The rune lords are really, really cool. How they set up. I like finding the right spell for the right situation, and I like playing utility wizards. I like playing wizards that have a lot of utility spells in combat and for exploration stuff. And the wizards just exceed in a lot of categories of play. There's not really any bad way you can play a wizard. You just kind of got to break away from the standard wizard stereotypes. I actually really, really like the wizard. It's a very flexible, dynamic class. It's definitely one of my favorites for a good reason. I also just really like magic-y aesthetics. I like mage aesthetics. I think the way their robes and the big hats look. I like the way I like the way they function. I like magic staves. I actually like magic staves and grimoires like a lot. I wish these games would do more when it came to grimoires and magic staves to make them more central to the idea of like at least the wizard or something. I think that there's a lot that can be done with it, but yeah, that's it. It's a lot of aesthetic, but I also just like its flexibility and the fact that it's a lot of a utility caster as well. Number two on the list is going to be the monk. I am a big fan of pugilism. I like hand-to-hand combat. I watch a lot of anime that's based on martial arts and all that kind of stuff. I studied martial arts for a good amount of time in my life. I love martial arts. Funny enough, though, I actually didn't like Monk, or at least Monk was not one of my top favorites for a lot of different systems. I always like pugilist aspects, and like the martial artist dedication in Pathfinder works really well for that. And for other games, I try to blend in a little bit of martial with other classes. I like, Gish style characters that are mages that can use hand to hand combat. I like all that kind of stuff. But Pathfinder 2E's Monk is really good. Really, really good. Not only are the stances all really good, they're very interesting. The different traits that they have are very astounding. Monk flows really well. Flurry of Blows as an innate class feature just makes the monk feel like they're always laying on the hurt. It also lets them be more mobile because they have extra actions equivalently, unless, of course you're going for 3-4 attacks, which I understand. It's very tempting and you can fish for crits that way as well. But what Monk really shines at is they're very utility. They have lots of exploration like ability that comes with their already pretty good offensive kit. They can have a stance for every situation. The stances are also super flavorful. The Secrets of Magic book added some mystic occult style stances, like the Flickering Flame and the Crashing Wave, I believe is what they're called. Both are really cool. Both are super aesthetic. They have key-based martial arts where you use a focus point to get into a stance, like the shadow whip stance, I think it's called, or something like that, where you can launch out wisps of negative energy to wrap people up and do, lots of like negative damage specifically. And it's a stance that once you get into it, you don't need to keep spending focus points. It really makes the monk really interesting. They got a really good blend of key abilities and straight up martial abilities as well. The monk is super dynamic. They're super interesting. I absolutely love the monk. I love their play style. And there's a lot of really interesting ways you can take the monk. Martial arts doesn't belong just to a bunch of Shaolin or Taoist style monks. There's a lot of different cultures and nations that have very strong pugilistic and spiritualistic, even, mind and body style aesthetics that you can pick. So it's one of the things that I really think that a lot of people don't really see, but it doesn't matter because the class really kicks ass and it's really, really strong. I think Monk is honestly one of the strongest classes in Pathfinder 2E for a lot of reasons. Their combat abilities are really strong, but the amount of exploration stuff they can do. Monks are handy in so many situations. And if you build your character right, you can do a lot of things, if not almost everything with the monk. Like, magic casters are the only thing that beat monks is as far as overall utility is concerned. I absolutely love the monk. And again, it's a lot of an aesthetic thing. I really like pugilistic fighting styles. I have very much empathize with it because, again, I have martial arts training myself. It's just a lot of things that I really get into it. I can really immerse myself into a monk. And I think that's really what makes monks stick out to me and why it's number 2 on the list. Speaking about number 2 on the list, number 1 is one that everyone already knows. I made a video on it. But if you're not aware, my favorite class is the Investigator. Now, the Investigator is a really unique class to Pathfinder 2E. Not a lot of classes have had an Investigator style class. 1E may have, I don't know. I didn't get much past the advanced players guide when it came to Pathfinder 1E at the time, so it may have come out. Other games have kind of baked Investigator into Rogue, and it's understandable. And in fact, even in Pathfinder 2E, Rogue and Investigator share a lot of similar features, but they do it in very different ways. And honestly, I absolutely love how the Investigator works. I love characters that are very thinky characters. Honestly, they're the characters I play the most. And of the 2 classes I've actually gotten to play on this list here, Investigator is the one I have the most experience with. The Investigator is super fun. I like how you can I like how the class doesn't have a lot of feats that I like, so that I have more reason to pick multi-class archetypes to pick a lot of interesting things. In fact, Investigator with some Inventor thrown in works really well, actually. Or Alchemist, it works well. Or Wizard, it works really well. Like, Investigator blends into other classes so well, giving the class just so much ability to be honed and tuned to your particular playstyle. Not only that, but I do like the Sherlock Holmes style, like, analyze the situation and use that in combat. For someone like me personally, in like some tournaments I've been into and whatever, I have an ability to think really, really fast. So when I'm in a fight, I'm actually thinking about what the next move I'm going to be making is and all that kind of stuff. And that very much lets me immerse myself into the Investigator so much. I am someone who is constantly thinking, strategizing, whatever. Whenever I do things like chess or whatever, I can just make my move in like under 5 seconds. It's not bragging because everyone has their own set of skills that are different. I think really, really fast. It helps me improv really, really well. It doesn't necessarily mean that what I come up with is always the best option or is always really good. Just because I can come to a solution faster doesn't mean I'm always right or that I've even, like taking time probably would have helped more. but I can at least make those quick decisions and make those, kind of investigative moments when I do a lot of my stuff in real life. And the investigator just really fits that. I like the whole devise a stratagem. It's really cool. I like the fact that I know what my number is going to be, so I can make an informed decision on what I want to do. When you mix it with a spell casting investigator, you can devise a stratagem, and if it's not going to work, you can cast a spell instead, buff an ally, do something else, or you might have something like guidance that you can give yourself to give yourself a hit. There's an interesting moment where technically we were using devise a stratagem a little incorrectly, but also not incorrectly. We were using it to have my character essentially get a really good crit shot off with a gun at the beginning of combat, because you could sit there and not fire the gun but keep rolling devise a stratagem. Of course 6 seconds pass every time they do so, because you can only do it once per round. But technically, if you're not in a combat situation, you can't use devise a stratagem. But if you're surprising attack an enemy, you can. Now, if the enemies don't know you're there, and your group engages a surprise attack, but everyone holds their action or whatever, it's a really weird situation. We always used it to initiate a fight, is essentially what was happening. And it was kind of in a weird gray area between exploration mode and encounter mode. If that's not what you think how the game would be played, I completely understand. It's really strong to be able to get a crit shot off on a combat before it starts. Now, this is, of course, if the enemies don't notice us, of course, and there's all kinds of stipulations to it. It came handy in a few situations, but not every combat situation. Even boss battles, you couldn't really use it, as you had to walk into a room, or if you stumble across enemies, or all kinds of things. But for the situations where we were prepared, it was really good, and it made me have a good idea for a strong Inventor investigator style character. But there's so many types of investigator I want to play that I literally can't get enough of it. I could play investigator for the next 5 characters and be satisfied with that. I would not get bored of investigator even once. It's that good for me personally. Investigator also has a lot of really good utility skills, a lot of good exploration. The class bleeds really good roleplay. Why are you an investigator? What is an investigator? Your character doesn't even have to be officially an investigator titled person. They can just be someone who's really smart that plans things out. They could be a mercenary leader who takes things, and they're a very cautious fighter. They judge the situation, make the choice. Like, there's a lot of things that investigator can be skinned as that makes it really good, and it's just one of my favorite. And not only that, but the theories, or whatever they're called, the subclasses, which I hate that term, but of the investigator are also really good. I like how each of them work. I like the alchemist one, the forensic one. They're all good. They're all really solid, and I love everything about the investigator. It feels like the investigator was made for someone like me, and that's why it is my favorite class. And that's it. That's the whole video. It's a little bit longer than typically I like to do. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video. I know it's a lot longer than a lot of my other videos, but hopefully now you get a little bit of an idea of what I like in tabletop and how I like to play and everything like that, as well as I'm sure some of you are interested in what my top 5 classes were. So let's hear from all of you. What are your favorite classes? Mention them down below. Please like and subscribe. I haven't been saying this a lot. I did at first, and I haven't been doing it recently, but I'm going to start doing this now because the channel is in a really good spot. I'm getting my production up, and honestly, the rest is just up to you guys. Whether the channel does well or not is dependent on, your interaction with the videos, if you're subscribing to the channel, if you're talking to your friends. I've mentioned before in videos, you're free to share any of my videos in wherever you'd like to do so. Whether you want to talk about a subject or you like to really show this off, I give my permission to share my videos wherever you want. So feel free to do so. Obviously, don't just scam account on YouTube and copy all my content over, but within reason. Yeah. So I guess with that, thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games and leave the bad luck to me. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.